The train derailment in Ohio has resulted in a massive environmental disaster. The 150-long train car was carrying toxic chemicals that have spilled into the ground and entered the atmosphere. Those aren't storm clouds, that is smoke mixed with toxic gas. What's up, doomers? Have you ever wanted to play Stalker: Shadow of Chernobyl, but in real life? Well, look no further than East Palestine, Ohio. 3,500 fish, people and pets being sick, residents being evacuated. First, let's do a timeline of the incident. Second, what these spilled chemicals were and their effect. Third, how the derailment occurred in the first place. Okay, for that last one, I mean, you know the answer. I know the answer. It's money, it's greed. According to the National Transportation and Safety Board, at approximately February 3rd at 8:54 p.m. local time, eastbound Norfolk Southern Railway train 32N derailed. 38 cars flew off the track and a fire ensued which damaged an additional 12 cars. There were a total of 20 hazardous material cars on the train, 11 of which derailed. The resulting chemicals started to spill into the air, surface soils, and surface waters. First responders found evidence of one of the train cars releasing vinyl chloride. I'll get into this chemical later, but it's pretty toxic. February 5th, the residents were ordered to evacuate, and on February 6th, the officials decided to do a controlled burn of the train cars containing vinyl chloride. The Ohio governor signed off on this. Vinyl chloride is flammable, so their logic was that by gradually burning away the chemical, it's going to cause a lot less damage than just having it all explode all at once and send shrapnel flying everywhere. So they basically just made holes in the train cars and sent the liquefied gas into a pit where it was set on fire. Officials called it a success because it did not explode. On February 7th, in a press conference, EPA officials and Norfolk Southern said that the toxic chemicals have been removed. On February 8th, the evacuation order was lifted and people were allowed to come back into their homes. On February 10th, however, the EPA released a document which showed that it wasn't just vinyl chloride in the cars. Initially, only VC and later butyl acrylate were disclosed as being hazardous chemicals, but the train was revealed to have also contained ethyl hexyl acrylate, ethylhexene glycol monobutyl ether, isobutylene. On February 12th, the EPA released the full list of toxic chemicals that it received from Norfolk Southern. Initially, it was only informed of the chemicals orally. And this is why a lot of people are pissed and have questions. If Norfolk Southern had this list the whole time, why didn't they release it immediately? Isn't it in the public's best interest to know what chemicals were spilled as soon as possible? Why did the EPA have to release this and not Norfolk Southern? The governor of Pennsylvania released a letter in which he roasted the train company for the way they handled it. Now, keep in mind this is also a political stunt, but it does reveal a few things. Pennsylvania's emergency services and environmental departments were not contacted immediately. They learned of this incident a few hours later. Norfolk Southern employees did not coordinate with local and state agencies, which caused an issue in leadership as first responders and management did not know what was going on or who to turn to. Norfolk Southern did not tell state and local organizations that they wanted to burn 5 cars of vinyl chloride. Initially, they thought they only wanted to burn 1. And they did not disclose the number of cars with hazardous material, which kind of corroborates with what the EPA said when they said it was only informed of these chemicals orally. The EPA does not want to take the blame here. Finally, Norfolk Southern did not explore any other options other than burning the cars. They didn't check in with Pennsylvania Emergency Management and see if there were any other alternate options. Also, I'm not saying anything, but kind of weird that they released the chemical list to the EPA during the Super Bowl. On February 16th, which is the day I'm recording this, the EPA has sent down a spokesperson to East Palestine. There was also that reporter that was arrested, but charges were dropped against him, so this is not really relevant. And on February 15th, Norfolk Southern was supposed to have a town hall, but they backed out of it last minute. So what chemicals were actually spilled? And I'm getting all this information directly from the EPA's website, but Andrew Welton on Twitter also made a handy chart that I'm going to reference. First, we got the big baddie, the vinyl chloride. VC is transported as a liquefied gas, but will quickly turn back into a vapor when exposed to the atmosphere. I couldn't find a definitive number on how much the train was carrying, but given that there were 5 train cars and this model specifically for vinyl chloride monomer carries anyway from 24,000 to 33,000 gallons. I'm no math magician, but let's just round it to 25,000 times 5. That's 125,000 gallons that were burned into the atmosphere. What does vinyl chloride do? Well, it's used to make PVC or polyvinyl chloride, which is a hard plastic resin used in credit cards, car parts, but most notably plastic pipe. It is toxic on its own, more dangerous than ammonia and natural gas, but less than DDT. Exposure to it can cause damage to the nervous and immune system, as well as decreases in bone strength and an increased risk of cancer. It can also contaminate the water supply, turning drinking water into a carcinogen. Officials decided that burning it away was safer than letting it leak to the ground or explode all over town. But when VC burns, it digivolves into 2 different gases, phosgene and hydrogen chloride. Phosgene is a chemical weapon used in World War I, where it was responsible for 85,000 deaths. It smells like freshly cut hay. This is probably the main chemical that kills all the wildlife in the surrounding area. And it can travel kind of far. A woman in North Lima woke up to find all her chickens dead after the train derailed. The catch is that North Lima is 11 miles away from the crash site. Fortunately, phosgene does not stick around for long and dissipates pretty quickly. The other chemical, hydrogen chloride, is an irritant that can cause swelling. However, when hydrogen chloride bonds with water, it turns into hydrochloric acid, and hydrochloric acid can cause severe chemical burns on the skin. And because officials burned up all the vinyl chloride, so it went up into the air, this has many people wondering, are we now going to have acid rain, as the hydrogen chloride will bond with the water particles in the atmosphere and come down. Since the crash, the EPA has conducted air quality tests and a week later has found no traces of phosgene or HCl, so it since has stopped testing for them. But at this point, the damage has been done by the vinyl chloride burning. As it went up into the air through the controlled burn, it was trapped by an inversion layer, which is a pocket of warm air that prevents all the other air from rising, which caused the smoke to spread out. You can see it here. Eventually, it blanketed the entire town. So I think it's a little misleading when officials call this a complete success. Anyway, it went up in the air, killed a bunch of animals, gave people nausea and headache, and then bounced. The other pressing issue here is now what leaked into the ground. The fact of the matter is there's thousands of fish in the water, and something must have caused this. An entire train car full of butyl acrylate was lost. It was spilled and on fire. The model of train car can contain anywhere between 16 to 27,000 gallons. Butyl acrylate is a colorless liquid with a strong, fruity odor. Exposure to the liquid can cause permanent lung damage and can be absorbed through skin contact. Norfolk Southern has done recovery operations to get the liquid out of the soil, including rolling out 2 20 cubic yard roll-off containers of absorbents. But is it too late? The city of Steubenville, which is an hour away from East Palestine, has detected butyl acrylate in its water. It was just trace amounts though, so it might be fine. No, the issue is back in East Palestine. Norfolk Southern have hired Arcadis to handle cleanup efforts, and the EPA, being the catty drama-loving it is, decided to spill the tea once again. Since the chemicals have polluted the waterways all around the town, aeration pumps have been built to filter the compounds out. But I don't know how I feel about that, because from my understanding, aeration pumps just dissipate the chemicals from the water and back out into the air. Call me a little quirky, but I don't know if it's a good idea to tell people that it's okay to go back into town when you've got these pumps that are taking chemicals from the ground and then just pushing them back into the air. The other big issue here is the groundwater, which they don't seem to have a plan for. All they're saying is that they'll just monitor it and then decide where to go from there. Ethylene glycol monobutyl ether currently listed as unknown status, which is a great answer. The chemical is used as a solvent in paint strippers, thinners, and household cleaners. It can cause harm to the eyes, skin, kidneys, and blood. In 2015, the American Chemistry Council, which is a lobbying group that tries to regulate chemicals, requested that the EPA remove this compound from their toxic chemicals list. The EPA refused and said, no, this chemical can cause irreversible effects and people have a right to know. So did this enter the groundwater? Was it burned off into the atmosphere? Your guess is as good as mine. Ethyl hexyl acrylate. So this was breached and is using the same car as the butyl acrylate, so anywhere between 16 to 27,000 gallons. Ethyl hexyl acrylate is used to make plastics and can cause drowsiness and convulsions in humans. It's also possibly carcinogenic. I couldn't really find any more info, but it was confirmed to have infected waterways all over town, so same as the butyl acrylate. So this was breached, almost the entire load was lost, but it's said to be non-toxic and used as a food additive. It's also used as an antifreeze, but generally recognized as safe. It's got high mobility in soil and will enter the groundwater where it breaks down. It's an issue in high concentrations where it can cause seizures, among other things. I couldn't find too much in terms of environmental impact, other than this one dude's study where he says it affects microorganisms and pH levels. It's also got its own website for some reason. Petroleum lube oil. So this is interesting because it can be anything. It's a whole ton of different chemicals. So a petroleum-based lubricant is used to reduce friction and protect machineries. Given that this is petroleum-based and not like propylacylene glycol-based or vegetable oil-based, it's probably not biodegradable. I don't think I need to really rehash what an oil spill will do to the environment, but yes, this can cause significant damage to humans and the wildlife, especially if it enters drinking water. Same with the petro oil. Diethylene glycol. So there were 2 train cars full of this liquid. Diethylene glycol is responsible for mass poisonings around the world. In 1937, it was sold as a medicine. It was raspberry flavored and killed more than 100 people. The incident is directly responsible for the FDA having the regulatory powers it does now. So yeah, not off to a great start with this one. It's responsible for deaths all around the world almost yearly. For example, on October 21st, 2022, 99 Indonesian children died after ingesting cough syrup with the stuff. It's not good that it was spilled, but fortunately it is water soluble, so eventually it will biodegrade. Let's just hope there isn't too much environmental impact before that happens though. There was a study done where diethylene glycol was exposed to rats through gas. I'm only mentioning this because, you know, the train car was on fire, so it's a good chance that some of it vaporized and went into the atmosphere. On low concentrations, there weren't any damages to the rats, but on higher ones, there was irritation in the respiratory tract. I have to mention though, apparently humans are much more sensitive to it than rats are. Are you guys still with me? I know that's a lot, but we still got to cover like how this whole thing happened. How did this happen in the first place? At 8:12 p.m., 40 minutes before the derailment, one of the train car's bottoms was seen glowing brightly. Officials have determined that it was an issue with the axle. It was on fire. When the axle overheats due to friction, it can cause what's called a hot box that eventually will derail the train. Hot boxes like this are not uncommon, especially if the train is older or has faulty machinery, so there are hot box detectors every 10 to 20 miles on the track, which alert the conductor that something's wrong. It seems that for whatever reason, the hot box detector in Salem didn't go off, and so the crew weren't aware until the detector in East Palestine went off, at which point it was too late to stop the train. But why did the axle get set on fire in the first place? Railway Workers United has provided an explanation. It said that it happened when the train was going downhill in Attica, Indiana. The way this train was structured, 40% of its weight was on the rear end. A lot of it was carrying liquids that sloshed around whenever the train braked, and this put an intense amount of pressure when the train was going downhill and resulted in a lot of jackknifing. This was made even worse because the train cars in the middle were equipped with cushion drawbars that slide independently to protect the cargo inside, so they're elastic and can stretch. The rest of of the train's weight was in the front because of the locomotive. I tried to figure out like braking dynamics and pressure, but honestly, this is way above my non-existent pay grade. Railway Workers United said that it was like putting 2 bowling balls and having them connected by a rubber band and then praying that the rubber band doesn't break. Now let's get into the why. Why did this happen? Well, Norfolk Southern has been a little naughty boy. They've got a lot of friends in Congress and have spent a lot on lobbying. Not to mention eliminating 22% of their staff since 2017 and spending billions on stock buybacks instead of new infrastructure and braking systems. Train 32N was not classified as a high hazard material flammable train, even though it was carrying high hazard flammable material. If it were, it would have been limited to a speed of 50 miles per hour, 40 miles per hour in urban areas, among other safety regulations. It's possible that it wouldn't even been allowed to go through East Palestine in the first place, but that would have cost money. Let's step back for a sec, because train derailments aren't anything new. In 2012, a train in New Jersey derailed, spilling, you guessed it, 23,000 gallons of vinyl chloride into a creek. In 2013, there was a train disaster in Quebec that killed 43 people. And then a year later in North Dakota, 500,000 gallons of crude oil were spilled. So the Obama administration proposed new safety rules for trains carrying high hazardous materials. But the train companies did not like this at all and lobbied like crazy. The resolution was neutered and really only focused on crude oil transport, notably requiring new electronic brake systems for trains carrying oil. But that wasn't enough. In 2017, train companies lobbied Trump to remove regulation that required these new electronic brakes. ECP brakes can reduce train stopping distances by as much as 60% compared to traditional brakes. Instead of the brakes firing front to back, all the brakes fire at the same time. So if they were installed on this train, employees say they could have mitigated a lot of the damage. As conventional brakes would have needed around a mile to stop the train, the ECP brakes could have stopped the train a lot faster after it was detected by the hotbox detector in East Palestine. But Norfolk Southern isn't single-handedly responsible for all this lobbying. Since 2011, railroad companies in the US have spent $191 billion on stock buybacks and dividends, all while laying off 30% of their workforce. They spent $138 billion in capital investment, so they just spent $53 billion more on just making their shareholders happy. In December 2022, railway workers striked because they were overworked and had no sick days. And although they got some of what they wanted, Biden ultimately blocked the strike, saying that it would cause too much damage to the economy right before the Christmas season. And he forced everyone to go back to work. Modern rail companies in the US now subscribe to a philosophy known as precision scheduled railroading. Kid Capitalism has a great article on this, but basically it means that train cars always have to be moving and have to be as long as possible with the fewest amount of employees. Maximize load and minimize cost. As a consequence, safety inspections of each train car have gone down from 3 minutes to 90 seconds. The Federal Railroad Administration does not place a limit on train car length, and this one was almost 2 miles long. USA Today said that derailments for Norfolk Southern have been ticking up over the past decade, with 14 damaged or derailed cars in 2012 to 117 in 2020 and 85 in 2021. In 4 months, Ohio has had 3 different train derailments. In fact, just this morning, as I'm recording this, there was another train derailment in Michigan. But precision scheduled railroading is very good for the company's bottom line, which makes the shareholders very happy. Okay, so now some FAQ. Do I think the town is safe? Well, the EPA says it is. The EPA also said that the air was safe to breathe after 9/11, so make of that as you will. Will Norfolk Southern get sued? Yes, there's like 4 different lawsuits happening right now, probably more coming. How are the residents doing? Well, not great. There was supposed to be a town hall in which Norfolk Southern backed out of. They announced that they will give all residents in the zip code $1,000 as compensation. Initially, though, they only wanted to give it to people within a mile radius because that's how big the evacuation zone was. But this does confirm that the evacuation zone was too small. Also, in their initial announcement, they said they were giving out $25,000, which is where that $5 per resident meme comes from, but I think that was just misinterpreted. Residents' pets died, their houses smell weird, there's a burning sensation in their eyes. I mean, they don't know if the well water is safe to drink. Shout out to Nick Drom for his coverage. I won't make any videos on this, but he will most likely keep talking about it, so check him out for more coverage. Thank you for watching. If you want more daily doomers, please consider liking and subscribing.